about anything after being gone for 2.5 weeks. Greece will do that to you. But anyway, we're getting back into it, and we'll just see how it goes from there. And then I'll have a couple of pop-in standalone episodes, whether it's a book interview with a certain subject like Japanese internment, and just kind of sprinkle that in there, as opposed to waiting for this to be over. So I hope you enjoy that type of format, and I will see you soon with the next episode. Take care, everyone.
My name is Greg Jackson. I'm a PhD holding historian, a professor, and the creator of History That Doesn't Suck, a podcast that makes legit, seriously researched American history come to life through entertaining stories. Join me for a chronological telling of the United States story, from the Revolution, the fractious Civil War, tenacious inventors, brave reformers, and more. With more than 100 episodes, you can already binge listen your way from 1776.
1950. Greetings, everyone, from Central Virginia. So I'm back trying to get into the flow of things. Hopefully this episode got us caught up on Army Group Center, and so next episode we'll be ready for the Soviets' counter-attack, counter-offensive, to push the Germans back. We'll see how that goes. Anyway, so as far as new members, let's see here. There's Stephen Stribling from Breaktown, Colorado. Thank you very much, Stephen. Jessica Corrales-Bellamy from Hampton, Virginia. Hello, Jessica. Or should I say, neighbor. Nice to have you aboard. Thank you very much. I don't think anybody donated since the last time I put out an episode, but I did want to thank Dee Grice for buying a Churchill bow. I've still got a few of those. Anyway, so I'm slowly getting back into the swing of things. It's very hard to come back and to care about anything. And if not, perhaps it was time to settle in to winter blues. Postscript. Time always benefits the defender, as in the attacker needs the source of defiance, i.e. a city, to stop contributing to the war, and until that happens, the attacker has not achieved their goal. And in this vein, Zhukov knew that with the snows and the rains out here, very few roads were usable, so he just focused on defending those that could be used. And his political master Stalin found out sometime in mid-October through his spy Richard Sorgey that Japan would not be joining in on the attack of Russia. No, they would be heading south. The result, on Stalin's orders, 13 rifle divisions and 5 tank brigades from the Soviet Far East were soon stationed somewhere, namely von Bock himself and Guderian. The former for failing to take Moscow, the latter for retreating in the face of superior firepower, though against Hitler's orders. And Hitler had declared the order of no retreat, not only because he needed Moscow to fall, but with the capital being conquered, perhaps this would be enough for Turkey to join the Axis, which would immediately put the Middle East back into play, not to mention offer a new threat to Russia through Stalin's own Georgia in the south. Also, with Moscow falling, perhaps the finicky Finns would try harder, or at the very least, help with more pressure on Leningrad. Yes, the fall of Moscow would make so many pieces come together for the man in Berlin. But how to make that happen? Something would come to mind, and if not all, they had war-gamed a German invasion and expected to lose much territory initially, but they never expected that Moscow would be approached as it had been, and thus the panic. But Stalin had declared himself back on October 19th. He would stay and fight for Moscow, which set the tone for everyone else. Hitler, though vacillating at times, had now come to the conclusion that to end this war in the East, Stalin's capital had to be taken. To stay in the war, to even have a chance of coming out victorious, meant he had to fight for his capital. Hence, both dictators put all their chips on the city that stands on the Moskva River. There would be 2 immediate consequences of Zhukov's offensive, both being the removal of commanders of or within Army Group Center, namely attackers in Moscow. And as men like Guderian, Haltner, and Reinhardt scratched their heads about the statement, von Bock was also telling OKH Chief of Staff Halder that he doubted the success of Operation Typhoon. Clearly, they had not cleared out enough of the defenders in front of the Soviet capital, which is not the same thing as having enough troops to go over on the offensive, certainly not against the more professional and experienced panzer groups. No, the Germans had time to rest their men and come up with, what, Typhoon Part 2? Not that it mattered, as Zhukov, having saved Moscow, though not single-handedly, was about to make his move and had Stalin's permission. It was the Soviets' turn, and it would start on December 5th. To be sure, the Russians had their backs to the wall. They had the 33rd Army, supported by the 5th and 11th Tank Brigades, plus one tank and two ski battalions. As these units entered Narrow-Fominsk from the east, their T-34s went prowling for the German Stuka guns. Problem was, they had limited vision when hunting for the panzers, so Zhukov, not wanting to give Stalin any bad news, had Soviet bombers destroy the taller buildings. This was done, and soon the T-34s could see further, and soon their shells, they were slamming into enemy vehicles of all kinds. Before too long, the Germans were leaving Narrow-Fominsk with their dead and wounded. Surprising the generals under him, von Bock, Army Group Center's commander, told these men that the enemy was about to break, which was true enough. Soviet defenses had broken many times, but they were still there, in between, to take Varo-Minsk, just 5 miles from the southwest corner of Moscow's outer suburbs. Basically, with their attacks to the north and south of the capital going nowhere, it was decided to try again from the west. And things started out well enough. The Soviet 43rd Army was mauled and bypassed. Soon the Soviet 5th Army behind it was fighting for its life. This was a dangerous moment for the defenders. The 5th Army had been protecting one of the few main roads into Moscow. The reason that both sides were willing to die for the road was that it was raised and so better protected against the rising mud when the snows had come and then melted. And now the Germans were coming up that very road. But General Zhukov, he was learning his German generals. On the second day of this local attack, Zhukov sent in the 33rd supporting Army Group Center. At this point, only had 549 serviceable machines, including 158 medium and dive bombers and 172 fighters. They had started out with so much more. The point is, the bombers had been wrecking Soviet rail lines when it served their purposes, along with enemy vehicles. Now, they were not bombing the rail lines around Moscow, which allowed the Stavka to quickly bring in reinforcements. Thus, to the west, north, and south, Operation Typhoon was grinding to a halt. But there was one last gasp of success for the invaders. After much complaining about how Field Marshal von Kluge, commander of the 4th Army, was not moving fast enough, or even trying hard enough, he ordered his 20th Army, the 9th Army, and the 57th Panzer, which was down to 70 tanks, to take. Goering stated in his diary that he backed off because the offensive on Moscow he underestimated the enemy's strength as well as his size. Fortunately, stopped by troops. Otherwise, the catastrophe would be unavoidable. Or rather, he was stopped on December 5th by the Russian forces coming at him and his. As touching Stalin's December offensive, another reason that the German victories at Vyazma and Bryansk would end up costing them their chance to enter Moscow proper was that the delay that came after this allowed the Stavka to not only bring forward more men, but it allowed 3 rifle and 2 tank divisions from eastern Siberia to reach the capital and form up. And for these men, the snow was a positive, not something to fight against. But that was in the future. Thus, to the west and south of Moscow, the attackers were checked, for now. As to the north of Moscow, here again, the Germans were making headway, but bleeding out while doing so. Near the end of November, the 7th Panzer Division had crossed the Moscow-Volga Canal, about 20 miles away, and they set up a bridgehead. But they would go no further, as the Soviet 1st Shock Army, assisted by the 20th Army, drove them back. Even closer to the capital, but still north of Moscow, another Panzer Division had reached modern-day Lobnia, just 12 miles or 19 kilometers from the Kremlin itself. But they were checked as well, between the Germans' exhaustion, a lack of supplies, Soviet defiance, and again, the mud. It didn't help the Germans that Luftwaffe 2, or Air Fleet 2, supporting Armagnacs' target, but the fighting had been fierce just to get to this point. To be sure, Guderian's panzers had wrecked all before them in this area. Now they just needed to capture Tula and go beyond it and approach Moscow. Even better, as Tula was the main road and rail center for the southern approaches to the capital, it would help the invaders and hurt the defenders. And yet, try as he might, Guderian could not break the defenses of Tula, so ended up going around the troublesome city to its east in frustration. This was his short-term answer, and this might have worked, but when Stalin called for his own offensive in December, Guderian's panzers were in an untenable position. What with having the Soviets control Tula behind them, this forced him to pull back. Yet everyone is the hero of their own story. Guderian stated in his